My God, it's full of stars.
Do you believe in time travel?
All right, Droogies, we have got a good one. It's going to be actually a two-part one. This is the first part of it. This will be part 7, and part 8 will be the second part of it. And we're on Donnie Darko. But before we get into Donnie Darko, we're going to do a little legwork to understand some of the clues that we saw earlier in the puzzle. And now that we know that we're talking about time travel and hypercubes, and it will make much more sense. So let's watch this short presentation. And this guy does a great job of imagining more
Modern
than...
theories tell us that there are 10 spatial or space-like dimensions to our reality. Hi, my name is Rob Bryanton.
I'll leave a
With this
link.
project, I have developed a creative way to use a variation of what's known as the point-line plane postulate to visualize those 10 dimensions, a concept that most would have thought impossible for the human mind to comprehend. How can we do this? We start with a point. Like the point we know from geometry, it has no size, no dimension. It's just an imaginary idea that indicates a position in a system. A second point, then, can be used to indicate a different position, but it, too, is of indeterminate size. To create the first dimension, all we need is a line passing through any 2 points. A first-dimensional object has length only, no width or depth. If we now take our first-dimensional line and draw a second line crossing the first, we've entered the second dimension. The object we're representing now exists within a plane that has length and width, but no depth. Way back in 1884, a fellow named Edwin Abbott wrote a book about a race of two-dimensional creatures called Flatlanders.
Notice he uses the one-eyed Jack in his book, Flatlanders. You know, and we have the one-eyed Jack. It's just ridiculous how many times it's being used. Throughout this entire puzzle, we've been using the one-eyed Jack and the Playboy Jacks and the Playgirl Jacks and the bunnies, and we're following the White Rabbit, and we have, you know, the director was born on Lewis Carroll's birthday, and so they're one-eyed Jacks.
Whether these imaginary creatures could really exist or not, they're useful for thinking about what it would be like to live in a flat, two-dimensional world. If we were to watch a balloon passing through the Flatlanders' world, for instance, it would start as a tiny dot, become a hollow circle which inexplicably grows to a certain size, then shrinks back to a dot before popping out of existence. But what would the Flatlander actually see? Imagining the extremely limited viewpoint of a creature confined within this 2D plane gets even stranger than that. Now let's move to the third dimension. This should be the easiest for us because every moment of our lives, that's what we're in. A three-dimensional object has length, width, and depth. But here's another way to describe the third dimension.
This is
We imagine
Descartes'
an ant walking
crater.
across a newspaper which is lying on a table. We can pretend that the ant is a flatlander, walking along on a flat, two-dimensional newspaper world. If that paper is now folded in the middle, we create a way for our flatlander ant to magically disappear from one position in his two-dimensional world and be instantly transported to another. We can imagine that we did this by taking a two-dimensional object and folding it through the dimension above, which is our third dimension. It'll be more useful for us as we begin to imagine the extra dimensions if we can think of the third dimension in this way. The third dimension is what you fold through to jump from one point to another in the dimension below. To be clear, no matter what dimension you are folding, it provides a way to move instantaneously from one distant position to another. A wormhole is the scientific term for this concept. Now that let's look at the fourth dimension. Just like any other spatial dimension, it's made up of two opposing directions. But we 3D creatures only experience this dimension in one of those directions. Why is that? It's because you and I are made out of 3D atoms and molecules, and we derive our energy from chemical reactions which move in one direction only.
But science shows us that time's reverse direction is just as valid. And in fact, the standard definition of antimatter is that it's matter which is moving backwards in time.
Suppose we have, say, the CERN ring, and we create a stream of anti-electrons traveling backwards in time, and then we find a simple way to modulate a television signal on one end and a demodulator on the other end, and you circulate these anti-electrons through this ring at 9.99999 of the speed of light for a couple months. Is it impossible to believe that you could communicate into the past, the future? I don't think so. So this would be the simplest application of this technology. Would be a few months ahead, maybe, or a year ahead, and this wouldn't even require anyone to travel anywhere to do.
So rather than saying the fourth dimension is time, let's use the word duration. If you were to imagine your body's duration as a shape in the fourth dimension, you could think of it as a long undulating snake with your embryonic self at one end and your deceased self at the other. But because our reality is observed one quantum frame after another from the third dimension, we are like our second dimensional flatlanders. Just like that flatlander who could only see cross-sections of objects from the dimension above, we as three-dimensional creatures can only see cross-sections of our fourth dimensional self. And just as you and I require the fourth dimension to change from state to state, think about how for a 2D flatlander, time would be one of the two possible directions in the third spatial dimension. Quantum mechanics tells us that the particles that make up our world are derived from waves of probability simply by the act of observation. It is for this reason that I like to refer to the
So
fifth
you
dimension as
collapse
our
the
probability
waveform
space.
just
And this
by
relates very
looking at
nicely
it
to a
or
theory
doing
which is
it
now
or
gaining
whatever the...
acceptance. Advanced in 1957 by Hugh Everett III, his theory is commonly known as the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It was Everett who showed us that these parallel outcomes reside within a space which is orthogonal to space-time, and the versions of the universe that we don't observe are just as real as the ones we do.
Yes.
What's orthogonal or at right angles to space-time? With this project, this leads us to the conclusion that Everett's many worlds reside within the fifth dimension. One of the most intriguing aspects of this approach to visualizing each new dimension as being orthogonal to the previous one is that it means we can be observing one dimension and be unaware of our motion in an additional one. Here's a simple example. If we make a Mobius strip, take a long strip of paper, add one twist to it and tape the ends together, and draw a line down the length of it, our line will eventually be on both sides of the paper before it meets back with itself. It appears, somewhat
Just
amazingly,
like,
that the strip
you know,
has
when
only
they-
one side,
when they do
so it must be a
the,
representation of a two-dimensional
circumnavigation.
object. And this means that a two-dimensional flatlander traveling down the line we just drew would end up back where they started without ever feeling like they had left the second dimension. In reality, they would be looping
Like
and twisting
Richard
in the third
Branson,
dimension, even though to them, it felt like they were traveling in a
flying
straight
around the
line.
world in this special
The fourth
airplane he
dimension
had.
feels like a straight line to us, moving from the past to the
Or his-
future with
or
what
his
some have
fucking
called the
balloon.
arrow of time. But that arrow is, without us even being aware of it, actually twisting and turning in the dimension above. So the long undulating snake that is
The
us at any
snake.
particular moment will feel like it is moving in a straight line in the fourth dimension, but there will actually be, in the fifth dimension, a multitude of paths that we can branch to at any given moment. Those branches will be influenced by our own choice, chance, and the actions of others. We move through those branches one Planck frame at a time, and this is why some physicists say that the fifth dimension is curled up at the Planck length, because from our reference frame, that's how it appears. It's important to note, though, that Everett was also very clear that causality could not be violated as we observe one outcome or another. So
Or
right
could
now,
it,
there is
you
zero
know?
probability that you or I can suddenly be in the world where, for instance, Michael Jackson is still alive. And yet the many worlds interpretation says those versions of the universe really exist within the quantum wave function. So how could we get there? We would need to fold our 5D probability space through the sixth dimension. I like to call the sixth dimension our universe's phase space. Why? A phase space is defined as a space in which all possible states of a system are represented, with each
All right, so
possible
we're
state of
fully
the
in
system
the
corresponding to
theoretical
one
realm,
unique point in
you
the
know.
phase space. So those points representing the versions of our universe where Michael Jackson is still alive are inaccessible to us from our current position within the fifth dimension, but they still exist within our sixth dimensional phase space. Now, as we enter the seventh dimension, we're about to imagine a line which treats our entire sixth dimensional phase space as if it were a single point. You could say that this point represents what Einstein was thinking about when he said the separation between past, present, and future is only an illusion. Some would call this point infinity for our universe. All possible outcomes, all wrapped up as one single, timeless everything. So if we intend to draw a seventh dimensional line that passes through this point, we need to be able to imagine what a different point in the seventh dimension is going to be, because that's what our line needs to pass through. But how can there be anything more than infinity? The answer is there can be other completely different infinities, other different everythings.
See, this is where my
conditions,
brain,
which are different from our own Big
explodes.
Bang. Different initial conditions will create different universes,
infinities.
where the basic physical
So
laws, such as gravity or the speed of light, are not the same as ours.
The
And the resulting branching timelines
hour.
from that universe's beginning to all of its possible endings will create a phase space of all possible states different than the phase space associated with our own universe. Think about this. What if the 7D line we just drew represented all possible universes with different values for gravity, with our universe someplace on that line? Lower gravity than ours would be in one direction, and higher gravity in the other. Would that line be a way to get to every possible universe? No. In order to represent other universes with the same value for gravity as ours, but with other basic physical constants changed, we need to branch off to the possibilities contained within the eighth dimensional phase space of all possible physical realities. And this would be true no matter what variables we were adjusting within the seventh dimensional line. We would still need the additional degree of freedom afforded by the eighth dimension to get to every possible physical universe. Now, how do we get to the ninth dimension? The same logical rules we've been using would apply. If we were to instantaneously jump from one eighth dimensional point to another without passing through the intermediate points, it would be because we were able to fold through the ninth dimension. Within this approach to visualizing the dimensions, then, the ninth spatial dimension is beyond any physical reality and is much more about information, a seething foam of possibilities which could represent impossible universes which exist only as concepts, or selection patterns which could be the beginning of a path toward a universe such as ours or any other. And to complete the logic we have used from the outset, we now take the entire ninth dimension and conceive of it as a single point. But this is where we hit a roadblock. If we're going to imagine the 10th dimension as continuing the cycle and being a line, then we're going to have to imagine a different point that we can draw that line to. But it can't be done. By the time we've imagined an ultimate ensemble of every conceivable information pattern as a single point of indeterminate size, there's no place left to go. M theory says that our reality is defined from 10 spatial dimensions plus time. And that's what we're talking about here, a 10th dimension without time. As soon as anything tries to happen within the 10th dimension, we are spilled back into the dimensions below, as subsets are carved out from this ultimate ensemble, this omniverse, this timeless and unchanging everything which underlies our reality or any other. And that is a beautiful and fascinating idea for us all to ponder.
So, there's somebody out there that looks just like you that got hit by a car today, and there's somebody out there that won the lottery. That, so any possible combination of things can and will happen in the omniverse, and you can jump through the omniverse somehow. So here we have some Salvador Dali.
What we're going to do here is we're going to look at this scene, and we're going to notice that there are various magic items that are moving on their own. During the shot, we're going to notice that Kennedy has, or Barry Nelson has, the theater curtains and the spatially impossible window, and there's a model of 3 conjoined hypercubes, and the pen to his left keeps moving, pointing to them. The 2 pens right by his hand keep moving, and the cigarette in the ashtray keeps appearing and disappearing as if it's magic. So that's a lot of continuity errors in a very short scene, and I'm just running them back and forth repeatedly, so you can see the pen move, you can see the little folder move near the pen, you can see the 2 pens by his hand move and flip directions. They go end to end, they do an endo, they mirror each other. And we can see the cigarette where there's smoke, there's fire. So we're told there's smoke, there's fire. We have the impossible, spatially impossible window. We have the disappearing bronze eagle that disappears during the scene. We have the other bronze eagle which disappears when Jack goes to disable the radio, it disappears. So there's various magic items in this room. We have a magic folder, we have a magic pens, 3 different magic pens, a magic cigarette, and a magic eagle. So, you don't have to do too much. And of course, right at the end of this, we see the double rainbows in Danny's room with Dopey sticker. The little Dopey sticker on the wall disappears, that one right there. So it's Rainbow Dopey we're talking about. And with all the birds on the door, we see Woodstock. That's a clue to Jimi Hendrix and Woodstock. And Danny's looking in the mirror, of course.
Would be the problem is the enormous cost it would be to keep the road to Sidewinder open.
So here we can see the pen move.
It's not a very demanding job. That's very
See
good.
the cigarette disappear and reappear.
Well, suppose they,
So these items are magic. The cigarette is our smoking clue, you know, the chain smoking or the smoke this fire. We have the folder, the magic folder disappears, so Kennedy had access to a magic folder. Okay, let's look at some hypercube depictions. There's a lot of different ways that artists and scientists have found to draw hypercubes, and this one's a Hinton cube right here, the one with the colors. There's another depiction of a Hinton cube, and it's kind of like if you could imagine if you take a film of an hour-long movie and slice it up into little frames and stack them up like a deck of cards as a Hinton cube. So you could think of a movie as like a Hinton cube. So here we have Tony Burton, a pro heavyweight boxer, and we have the little paper thing to his right is moving.
The snowplows are keeping things moving.
And watch the Napa sign behind it in the back. It flips. So the cube is moving on its own during the scene. And also the two electrical cables, one of them looks like it goes to the TV, is moving, and then it plugs itself in at some point. So we have multiple magic things are moving in the scene. We have the Hinton cube model on the desk is spinning around and flipping. We have the Napa NASA sign in the back, does a 180 for tractors. That's our tractor clue. And we have the plugs on the wall and the X. So we pointed to the Hinton cube and the hypercube. So let's go to a clip where we see a Looney Tunes character, Woody Woodpecker, in the original Time Machine. So the Looney Tunes thread is in the first movie, The Time Machine, based on H.G. Wells.
Well, I was soon to find out that we weren't.
So watch carefully. There he is, Woody Woodpecker. So he's a wood and he's a pecker, you know, so. And he's a bird, and he's a Looney Tune, and he's a cartoon, and he's a dolly. So here's all the Looney Tunes, and you're crazy, and you're mad, and you're batty, and you're shine on you crazy diamond, the crazy lady, crazy Earl, cuckoo clockwork orange, one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
First, I wondered if my machine and I were...
So this thread is being repeated through these movies. This crazy loony, you're nutty, you're fruity.
Well, I was soon to find out that we weren't.
He lost his blue marbles, you know. He's a few cards short of a full deck. We got Woody Woodpecker, the Looney Tunes character in the original George Powell, The Time Machine, with Rod Taylor. And of course his name fits right in. We're weaving the fabric. He's a tailor, and you have all the rods and mine shaft, and you know Woody Woodpecker is a rod. So we use holidays in Kubrick's language, and it's like one of the first scenes in the movie almost. We see the Halloween sign, and he's riding a bicycle, 10-speed, and we see the red Trans Am Firebird Phoenix car go by. Below, we see the Ford Taurus and the 911. The Taurus is a bull, and you got the Porsche, Dr. Porsche 911. So,
A storm is coming, Frank
there's
says.
the 911 again.
A storm is coming, Frank says.
Donnie's father's car.
A storm is coming.
It's a 6-cylinder boxer engine. So these are all the congruencies with all the 1200cc VW powered vehicles that are in this puzzle. And of course the Beetle is the father of the 911.
There's a nice guy named Christopher Nolan. So he watches the film with us and the producers, and financiers, and distributor.
And when the lights went up, Chris and his wife said very kind things to the head.
So they're explaining why all these talented actors came together to do this low-budget movie
how we
that,
present
you
the
know,
title
wasn't
cards.
going to be
But
sold
essentially,
easily.
He was like, I wouldn't.
And
change
somehow
anything
they all
except maybe
miraculously want to
these
do the
title
movie,
cards.
and they love
And
it, and they
then
can't wait to start.
Aaron had the idea of doing one additional day of photography.
You know, you have a no-name director.
James
He's
Duval
never
to
done a
map it
movie
over
before,
montage.
and a no-name editor.
To see the mask being
And you
built.
have Drew Barrymore
And
lining
catch
up
his
to do the
eye.
movie.
And we finished it. And then we had to convince Newmarket to put it in theaters because they still weren't.
Yeah, they didn't want this in
Couldn't
theaters.
necessarily do a theatrical release. And so we brought the heads of Newmarket over to Drew Barrymore's office. And we put him in the room with Drew Barrymore. And she turned on that smile and she said, "You guys are going to put this in theaters now, aren't you? Aren't you?" And they had to say yes. Sure enough, they're like, "All right, we'll put it in the 50 theaters, Halloween weekend, and we'll do a Halloween-themed release."
So here you're at, you know, these are all the masked
Theme of
characters.
the
We're
film.
walking through the house, another masked Halloween.
Finally, we survived this.
First day at the Overlook.
This ordeal, and we're gonna get a theatrical release, and it'll be reviewed by major critics. And,
Excuse me.
you know, we made it.
And then 9/11 happened.
And
then 9/11 happened.
So isn't that weird? 9/11 happened.
None of us really were too thrilled with the idea about releasing the film, which in the independent world was really New York and LA. So those were really the two cities. If it worked there, then it would go
so
elsewhere.
New York was in a
And
shambles.
the last thing on anyone's mind for those few months, you know, I was in New York at the time, was going to the movies or
You know,
seeing
now
movies, like,
think, remember Back
people
to
were
the
really
Future.
fixated on what was going on.
You know, Doc Brown steals some plutonium and from the Libyans, you know, terrorists. So I mean, there's connections to other movies to this subject as well. So there's Linda Hamilton. She has an identical twin. There's the Twin Towers. There's the twin boxers that are in Kubrick's movie, the Day of the Fight. The twin Burns twins. They were sisters in the book. Bipolar. There's Elvis and his twin that died at birth. There's the HAL 9000, who has a twin 9000 on Earth. There's Elvis and his twin stillborn. Elvis was a rainbow baby. There's Apollo and Artemis. They're twins, bipolar twins. One's male and one's female. There you have twins. You know, you have Nicholson and Johnny Malkovich. You have the Burns, or you have the Arbus twins grown up. There's the Arbus twins original picture. One's happy, one's sad. They're always bipolar twins. Twin Peaks, you know, they got the saw blade. You get the Twin Pines, the Lone Pine. So 2 becomes 1, 21. The Twin Towers become the Freedom Tower. You get the 9/11 clues in Back to the Future. They're everywhere, you know. Here we have Back to the Future 3, I believe it is, and we have a telescreen window in the house. And it's showing 2 trees. And we see the Lady Liberty torch right in front of his mother. And then we see the Twin Towers, and the vertical hold goes off for a few seconds. You know, so what is Lady Liberty and the Twin Towers doing in Back to the Future 3? So you have the Twin Pines Mall, and you flip the sign, and it's 9/11. Mirroring, flipping, palindromes. So Donnie Darko, his father drives a 911. We've been using vehicles through the beginning, from the beginning of this puzzle. We're using the Mustang and the Morgan and the Roadrunner and the Superbird. Then you have the subliminal 911 when he time jumps through the lightning. You know, this is would be Jupiter's lightning and his eagle. The twin boilers. It was one boiler in the book. The Twin Towers. Then the Pinto, released on born on 9/11, 1977. A pony car. It's a horse. It's a flying horse. The Choctaw Chopper lifting the flying horse. The White Power Pinto. The Nazi White Power Pinto that explodes when you hit it from the rear. I mean, it has clues into 9/11 right in the car itself. There you have the yellow Pinto that we see in the Final Countdown with Catherine Ross, who is also going to be in Donnie Darko. So here's the vehicles. Many of them are horses. And you have the Sea King chopper, and the Sea King is King Neptune, or Poseidon, depending on which way. So it's a connection to King Neptune again. And we see the yellow Pinto and the Corsair. The Corsair is a boxer engine, rear engine, air-cooled car, just like the 911, which we see in the Philadelphia experiment.
Do you mind?
Go ahead.
That's me.
And it's
nice.
Sibler, it's the son of the Beetle.
Now that's really me.
So we see the 911 in you know, multiple movies. And then we go back to Dennis Hopper. Remember, we're hopping and we're jumping and we're leaping. And he mentions D.H. Lawrence, and he was born on 9/11.
Well, you wrote a little bit of a song about Stanley Kubrick.
Yes. One day.
So we have Scatman's song about Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley says, would you mind if I wrote a tune about you? And he is somewhat a little shy. He says, no, Scat, I'd be delighted. I says, thank you, because I've already written it. And he kind of laughs. He says, yeah, now to show you how concerned he is, he says, what's the title of the tune that you've written for me? I said, well, the title of the tune is Stanley, and in parentheses, does it all. He says, could I hear a few bars of it? I said, sure. So I took him over to this table where Jack was doing all this typing. So I said, now here's where it goes. I said, I'll sing you a few bars of it. Doom, shoo-beam, da-doom, shoo-ding-doom, shoo-ding-da-doom. There's a man, doom-ding-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-ding, living in London town, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-ding-da-doom, makes movies, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom. He's world-renowned, shoo-beam-da-boom, shoo-beam-da-boom, shoo-beam-da-boom. Yes, he's really got the fame. Stanley Kubrick is his name. He does it all. Shoo-ding-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom. He does it all. Shoo-ding-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom. I'm telling y'all, shoo-ding-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-beam. Stanley does it all. Shoo-ding-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom. He's a writer, he directs, he produces his projects. He's the man behind the lens, and Stanley always wins. He's the man who looks ahead, can make you think he raised the dead.
The man who looks ahead can make you think he raised the dead.
Edison cuts all his flicks. He's a genius with his tricks. He does it all. Shoo-ding-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom, shoo-beam-da-doom. He does it all. Shoo-ding-doom. And he flips.
So
I did.
he can make you think
and
he raised the dead.
His daughter, Vivian, she was doing the documentary film.
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. So she said, now, Scatman, when you finish your movie, says, now, when I interview you, you will have to do the tune that you have written for my father. So the tune is in the documentary film. If she ever releases it, she's bad as her father. I don't know when she's going to release it.
Bad as her father. I don't know when she's going to release it.
Bad as her father.
Well, I'm hoping that there are some major
And Scatman's smoking during this interview. It's kind of been edited out. They didn't really want you to see him doing that. But you can see the smoke coming out of his mouth right now when he's talking.
Wait until you see the shine.
So with the smoke, there's fire.
That will chill the young and old.
And we see Scatman with the smoking gun pipe playing piano at the Colorado Lounge.
Wake up.
So wake up, smell the coffee. So let's take a look at Donnie Darko again. You know, it's the foreword, foreshadowing. And Marty drives a Forerunner.
In college. I went to USC, he went to UCLA. He helped me with my grad film that wasn't really a grad film. It was this self-financed.
So they're doing this grad film, Visceral Matter, and it's about teleportation. You know, what are the odds?
Not that I knew much about what that meant at that time. I was still in college, but he sent me the script and it was crazy, and we started working together from then on. After we did the film, of course, we're, you know, college graduates broke and need jobs, and I took a job as an assistant at New Line Cinema, and Richard took a job at a post facility where he was like the post gopher, you know, replacing toilet paper in bathrooms and stuff.
So it's a post-production facility, you know. So this is where they're cutting things up and doing what they're going to do with them.
His film.
Initially, I was actually Richard.
The great kind of Twilight Zone era of writing.
So with the Twilight Zone.
Mix that in with the nostalgia of growing up in the 80s and what was going on politically at that time. I mean, a lot of the...
You know, they just showed you George Bush on TV. That's his 1,000 points of light speech. So we have the grand overlook.
Not that much, 2 or 3 months kind of
1,000-yard stare.
Richard was the flavor of the month, but I think he was
And one of our woods is Hollywood, obviously.
The screenplay was
you know, you have Elijah Wood and Eastwood and Natalie Wood and
complicated
Woody Allen and Woody Strode and Woody Wilson and Hollywood.
This is gonna sound kind of weird, but do you know anything about time
travel?
Nancy Juvonen at Flower Films, who is Drew Barrymore's producing partner, was literally just curious as to what Jason was doing next.
So we're using flowers.
Rushmore. And so her agent mentioned that he wanted
And anyone who's a fan of the Hunger Games series is going to, you know, say, oh, yeah, of course we are.
I want to meet with you on this. We went to the set of Charlie's Angels, met Drew and Nancy in Drew's trailer, and they had clearly been...
So you have Drew Barrymore is meeting Nancy in her trailer, Drew and Nancy trailer. So we have Nancy Drew. We're always looking for famous book detectives or famous TV detectives. So here's a list of all the detectives we've used so far.
Voicemail message.
And I know there's going to be more. And I have a whole list of ones I suspect, but I don't want to put them down until I know they're in there.
And Richard and I looked at each other just like, yeah, this is the guy.
What happens if you tell Mom and Dad about
So, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Put Ariel in the garbage disposal.
So he says he'll throw Ariel in the garbage disposal. So Ariel is actually a stuffed unicorn, multicolored unicorn. Come on, people. Hello, hello. Just like our Pegasus Rainbow Pony, Kubrick. You know? You gotta wonder. So there's the Pegasus the Pegasus Rainbow Pony at the Moloko bar, and of course it's a star, you know, it's the Big Dipper, and there's a Pegasus Rainbow Dash pony with the bowler hat on, and there's our Project Rainbow ship.
God damn right I will.
And then the funny thing about Maggie was Joseph Middleton said, you know, Jake has a big sister.
So we're in Kubrick's language, we're using mother and father, brother and sister. You know, it's always got to be the right suit.
Why should I hire
have
someone
brother
to
and
pretend
sister
to be
of
a
the
big
same
sister
Gyllenhaal
the real big
suit,
sister and have the emotional connective tissue of the family dynamic?
Anyway, I'm not gonna squeeze one out till I'm like 30.
Will you still be working at the yarn barn?
So
because I hear that's a really great place to raise children.
Clues to knitting the yarn barn.
It's a really great place to raise children.
That's really funny.
This is the great thing about Maggie is that she tried to talk me out of casting her. She had never really done a movie before. I think she had a cameo in a John Waters film. And that was
So this is her first movie.
And she's trying to talk me out of casting.
Ding, 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 ding.
I'm like, well, no, I want you, and the fact that you're saying
Just
what you're saying right now makes me
Jamie Lee
believe you
Curtis,
even more,
her first
you know?
movie is Halloween.
Holmes Osborne. Holmes was really Holmes Osborne.
So
Holmes was
Osborne. We're using famous book detectives. Holmes Osborne, Sherlock Crater. You have
300
Bill Watson.
infantry. Toe jam.
Sir, yes, sir.
All 300 infantry. Adams.
Sir, yes, sir.
1,800 engineers. You go out and find mines. Cowboy.
Sir, yes, sir.
All 300 infantry. Taylor.
Sir, yes, sir.
Knitting.
All 300 infantry. Joker.
Sir, yes, sir.
Cards.
4212, basic military journalism.
4212, basic military journalism. This is Platoon
You gotta be shitting
4212.
me, Joker. You think you're Mickey Spillane? You think you're some kind of
So
fucking
you got
writer?
Mickey Spillane, a famous
You think you're some
novel
kind of
detective
fucking
that always
Sir,
gets
I
his
wrote for
man.
my high school newspaper, sir.
Jesus H. Christ, you're not a writer. You're a killer.
A killer, yes, sir.
Gomer Pyle.
Killer, yes, sir.
Gomer Pyle.
Off of auditions, he just felt like Donnie's dad. And Mary,
So Holmes.
she was an immediate get. She was like one of those, wait, we can get her?
Has he ever told you about his friend Frank?
So there's Catherine Ross. She was starring in the Final Countdown
Frank?
with Kirk Douglas Needles.
Yes, the giant bunny rabbit.
So
The
it's
nicest
not
guy
just a
in the
bunny
world,
rabbit.
Literally, as a person.
It's a
But
giant
he also looks
bunny
like he
rabbit.
can be,
That's how they're referring to it.
you know,
It's
the
supposed to be
punk
6
kid
feet tall.
sometimes, particularly in the 80s.
I came into the room and they asked if I had any questions, and actually, you know, because I'd spent so much time reading it, I told them, actually, no, I didn't have any questions, but I did want them to know one thing. I absolutely get it.
So this guy's been in the industry for a while. So you wonder.
I think at that point, they kind of looked at me kind of really strange. I don't know, you know,
They're
if
like,
they
oh no,
believed
we have
that I had
a
really
guy that's in the
understood
movie that already
material.
knows
I had
the puzzle.
gotten it,
Yeah.
but I certainly had, at least to me. And the audition scene was where it was just one scene, and it was a few lines. It was right after.
And of course, Frank is
I
masked.
run over
You know,
Gretchen,
he wears the,
Jenna
a
Malone's
mask.
character,
It's
and
a
asks
bunny
what they're
mask.
doing in the middle of the.
So we have the Trans Am, the Grassy Ditch, the Pontiac Indians, the Ragdoll. The hood of the car is mentioned. The crumpled hood of the car is where the chimney lands on top of, right where the Phoenix would be. So these are script pieces, and some of the script has been changed. You'll watch during this interview, you'll notice that, oh, they're using a
And
different
then
thing
Donnie
for
shoots
this.
me in the eye, and that was the entire audition scene.
So you have the snowflake wheels. You have the Phoenix hood sticker. It's a sticker that you put on there. And the Firebird, the Johnny DeLorean Firebird Kubrick toy. It's a jumper. It jumps over rivers, and it's, you know, the thing's they had to go through like 20 of them to get the movie done, and they're all destroyed. So Donnie tells him to take the rabbit mask off, the giant rabbit, shiny rabbit mask. And we get to find out that he isn't just a giant rabbit. He's a giant one-eyed Jack. And Donnie is the man that shoots his eye out with a 1911 Colt 45. So that's uncanny. I mean, the one-eyed Jack's category is ridiculous. All right, so I'm going to stop around here because I don't want to go on too far on the making of, because it's going to spoil all the stuff that's in Donnie Darko, the movie. But I did want to cover that we're seeing the repeating 9/11 thread in Back to the Future. We're seeing it in the Philadelphia experiment. We're seeing it in Donnie Darko. And the director is actually talking about the movie and saying, oh yeah, right after it came out on Halloween, we had 9/11, and it really, you know, threw a wrench into the you know, getting the movie seen, because people were just obsessed with what was going on in New York, and, you know, CNN's ratings were skyrocketing. And another thing I wanted to mention today, I'm in the middle of editing this thing, and all of a sudden I start getting pop-ups from Microsoft. They need to do an update right in the middle of the freaking day, which is not where I have it set to do. And this machine is on, like, you know, 18 hours a day anyway. There's no reason for, you know, to pop up at 12 noon to do an update. So anyway, it locked Power Director up. So I was like, well, let me just do the freaking update. So I say install update and reboot the machine. It was a half an hour for it to do the update. So it had to be in the gigs that they were transmitting. So it does the freaking update, and then I reboot the machine, and now it's broken. Power Director is locking up the minute I launch it. Then the screen recorder wasn't working. It's changed the double monitor setup. I mean, it's just, what is going on at freaking Microsoft? You know, it's just like child's play. I mean, they don't know what the hell they're doing. So about an hour and a half later, I got the screen recorder working again. Somehow it went in and changed the settings in the screen recorder, which, you know, why is Microsoft Update doing that? And there's a new bug in Power Director now. So I don't need to wonder where the new bug came from. The only thing that changed on the PC was a Microsoft Update. So, you know, it's ridiculous. And but anyway, that's neither here nor there. And I hope you liked the video. You know, here we have all the Saturn clues. You know, the Saturn, the god of time, the Saturn V rocket, the Saturn planet, the Saturn. He eats all his children. He carries the sickle. He's known as the Grim Reaper now. Here he is eating his children. So these go back to the original, you know, Apollo missions where you had the Saturn V rocket. Kubrick was giving you the god of time in the Battle of the Titans. And this is literally what we're doing. We're talking about people who have control of the dimensions that we can't manipulate. And, you know, it's a power that's too great for man to be trusted with, in my opinion. There's the Saturn V rocket. And that's it, guys. I hope you liked it. It was so hard to produce because I've been working so many hours now, and with the technical issues I had today, I was ready to throw the thing out the window. You know, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the CPU utilization, and it's like 3%, 2%. You know, so it's not a computer hardware issue. It's a software change that was made today by Microsoft while I was using the product. You know, it's like, anyway, thanks, Bill Gates. You know. And that's it, guys. Have a great night. Carpe diem. Peace and love.
Training, sir! Training, sir! What kind of training, son? Army training, sir! Army training, sir! Razzle dazzle! Where's your drill sergeant, men? Load up, sir! Load up, sir!
Yes, sir. These are Sergeant Hulker's men. He was injured during basic training.
I see. So am I to understand that you men completed your training on your own? That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack! Captain?
Yes, sir.
These are exactly the kind of go-getters I want working on my...
4212, basic military journalism.
Rutherford was serving a life sentence for his conviction in the 1968 shooting. And the search continues in the mountains near Uray today for that missing aspen.